In the cold of the early morning, a car slows down next to a rust-covered warehouse. A man quickly gets out, carries a German Shepherd covered in wounds, and throws it into an industrial furnace. Among torn boxes, a baby crawls toward the faint, whimper coming from deep inside. The man leaves without a word, locking the place in darkness. The baby touches the dog's snout with his finger. In a sharp move, the animal stands up, still trembling. A shudder spreads through the metal structures. And then, love stories with animals. Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for following us. Now, back to our story. In the heart of Rustville, Pennsylvania, where abandoned factories stood as tombstones of a once thriving industrial era, an old manufacturing plant sat forgotten at the edge of town. Its metal walls, corroded by time and neglect, groaned with each gust of wind that swept through the Appalachian foothills. Inside this desolate structure, a German Shepherd lay wounded in an old industrial furnace, his once gleaming coat now matted and filthy, his body bearing the marks of betrayal and abandonment. Hunter had once been the pride of the Mitchell family, a loyal companion who guarded their suburban home with unwavering dedication. For 5 years, he had been part of their lives, watching their children grow, protecting their home, and offering unconditional love. But when financial hardship struck and the Mitchells had to downsize, difficult decisions were made. Hunter found himself abandoned, left behind like an unwanted possession. The pain that pulsed through his body wasn't just physical. It was the ache of rejection that wounded him most deeply. He didn't understand how the family he had protected could discard him so easily. The whimper that escaped his lips echoed against the cold walls of the abandoned factory, a silent plea for help that seemed increasingly distant. On the other side of the vast space, in a makeshift crib fashioned from cardboard boxes and tattered blankets, 15-month-old Lily Anderson had managed to escape her containment. Her mother, Jessica, a single parent struggling to make ends meet, had been forced to bring her daughter to this forgotten place while she scavenged for salvageable materials to sell. Jessica had carefully created a safe space for Lily before, venturing deeper into the factory, never imagining her curious toddler would find a way out. Lily, with eyes wide and innocent, crawled slowly across the dirty floor, drawn by the distressing sound reverberating through the air. Maternal instinct, which knows no boundaries, guided the child's small movements toward the presence that seemed so vulnerable. As she reached the German Shepherd, her tiny hands touched his bloodied muzzle, and in that magical instant, something incredible happened. Hunter flinched at first, years of training telling him to be wary of strangers. But there was something in the child's touch, something pure and innocent, that transcended the pain and memories of abandonment that haunted him. The gentle contact was filled with an innocence that overwhelmed the hurt. Instead of reacting with pain, Hunter emitted a soft whine, a sound that transcended lament. It was a call to life, a connection that defied the wounds of the past. With a sudden impulse, he rose, memories of happier times and moments of affection stirring in his mind. As he stood, the environment around them seemed to vibrate, as if that act of resilience had the power to alter the very essence of the factory. A forgotten plant, which appeared dead and hopeless, sprouted from the ground, its white and vibrant. Flowers opening in a spectacle of colors, symbolizing new life emerging from the shadows. The factory, once a symbol of pain and abandonment, began to transform into a space of hope. Lily, in her innocence, smiled as she saw the dog rising, and her childish laughter echoed through the factory, attracting the attention of other abandoned animals that, like Hunter, had been left behind. A one-eyed tabby cat peered cautiously from behind a rusted machine. A limping raccoon, unusual for having befriended humans, emerged from its hiding place beneath the floorboards. They approached timidly, guided by the light emanating from that dark corner. Under Hunter's leadership, they formed an unexpected new family. The dog, now filled with a new purpose, became the protector of the factory, guiding the other animals on a rescue journey through the neighborhood, uniting those who had suffered and who longed for a home. As this new dynamic unfolded, Jessica returned to the area where she had left Lily, only to find the makeshift crib empty. Panic seized her as she called out for her daughter, her voice echoing through the vast empty space. Her heart pounded in her chest as she frantically searched, following small handprints in the dust that led deeper into the factory. When Jessica finally rounded a corner and saw her daughter sitting amidst a gathering of animals, her first instinct was fear. She rushed forward, ready to snatch Lily away from potential danger, but she stopped short at the scene before her. Hunter, though clearly injured, had positioned himself protectively next to the child. The other animals, rather than appearing threatening, seemed to form a circle of protection around Lily, who was giggling and reaching out to pet the German shepherd's muzzle. "Lily," Jessica called, her voice a mixture of relief and confusion. "Chubby," the sound of her mother's voice. Lily turned and smiled, babbling excitedly and pointing at Hunter. Jessica approached cautiously, still wary of the animals surrounding her daughter, but as she drew closer, she noticed something extraordinary. The animals didn't scatter or growl. Instead, they watched her with intelligent eyes that seemed to communicate understanding. Hunter lifted his gaze to meet Jessica's, and in that moment, a connection formed. Jessica had always been intuitive, sensitive to energies and emotions that others might miss. What she felt emanating from the German shepherd wasn't aggression or danger. It was protection, loyalty, and a profound sadness that mirrored her own struggles. "How did you all end up here?" she whispered, slowly kneeling beside her daughter. Her hand instinctively reached out to touch Hunter's head, and though he winced slightly from his wounds, he didn't pull away. Jessica's life hadn't been easy. Abandoned by Lily's father before the birth, struggling to find stable work in a town where opportunities dwindled daily, she had come to know the sting of rejection and the weight of survival all too well. In Hunter's eyes, she recognized a kindred spirit, someone else who had been discarded when they became inconvenient. As the afternoon sun began to filter through the broken windows of the factory, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, Jessica made a decision. She couldn't leave these animals here, especially not the wounded German shepherd who had watched over her daughter. "Come on," she said softly, gathering Lily in her arms. "Let's get you cleaned up." She wasn't speaking just to her daughter now, but to Hunter and the unusual assembly of creatures that had formed this unlikely alliance. Hunter hesitated, years of training and recent betrayal warring within him. But when Lily reached out toward him again, her small hand extending an invitation, something shifted in the atmosphere of the abandoned factory. The walls seemed less oppressive, the shadows less threatening. A beam of sunlight broke through a hole in the ceiling, illuminating the small group in a golden glow that felt almost deliberate. With a deep breath that seemed to release some of his pain, Hunter took a step forward, following the human who carried the child who had awakened something within him that he thought had been lost forever. Trust. Jessica Anderson's small trailer at the edge of Rustville wasn't much, but it was home. A second-hand couch with mismatched cushions occupied the tiny living room, alongside a coffee table rescued from a neighbor's curb. The kitchen consisted of a mini refrigerator, a two-burner stove, and a sink with temperamental plumbing. It wasn't grand, But Jessica had worked hard to make it cozy for Lily, decorating the walls with her daughter's handprints and colorful drawings. As she stood in the doorway, Lily in her arms and Hunter hesitantly at her heels, Jessica questioned her own sanity. She could barely afford to feed herself and her daughter, yet here she was, inviting a wounded German shepherd into their already cramped space. Behind Hunter, the one-eyed tabby and the limping raccoon lingered at the edge of the property, as if waiting for permission to approach. "Just the dog for now," Jessica whispered to herself, setting Lily down on the worn welcome mat. "We'll figure out the rest later." Hunter remained at the threshold, his amber eyes scanning the interior with the wariness of an animal who had learned that invitations could be rescinded without warning. It took several minutes of gentle coaxing from Lily, who kept patting the floor beside her and saying, "Doggy, come," before Hunter finally stepped inside. The weeks that followed established a routine none of them could have anticipated. Jessica bathed Hunter in the small bathroom tub, carefully tending to his wounds with supplies from the discount drugstore where she worked part-time. She couldn't afford veterinary care, but years of caring for her younger siblings and later her elderly grandmother had taught her the basics of wound management. At night, despite Jessica's attempts to create a bed for Hunter in the corner of the living room, the German shepherd would silently pad into Lily's small bedroom, positioning himself at the foot of her toddler bed. Jessica would find them this way each morning, her daughter's small hand, often resting on Hunter's now cleaner fur, both sleeping peacefully. During the day, while Jessica worked her shifts at the drugstore and her evening job waiting tables at Rusty's diner, their elderly neighbor Mrs. Reynolds would watch Lily. The arrangement had worked well for months, but on a particularly rainy Tuesday, Mrs. Reynolds called with apologetic congestion in her voice. "I've caught this awful cold that's going around," she wheezed. "I can't risk getting Lily sick, dear. I'm so sorry." Jessica's mind raced through her options, which were dismally few. She had already received 2 warnings about tardiness at the drugstore, and missing a shift could mean losing the job altogether. With rent due in a week and the electric bill already past due, she couldn't afford that risk. "It's okay, Mrs. Reynolds. Feel better," Jessica replied, trying to keep the panic from her voice as she hung up. She looked at Lily, happily stacking blocks on the floor with Hunter watching attentively beside her. The German shepherd had recovered remarkably in the 3 weeks since they'd brought him home. His wounds had healed into pink scars, and his coat, though still bearing patches where fur was growing back, had regained some of its luster with regular brushing. "What am I going to do with you, sweetie?" Jessica murmured, kneeling beside her daughter. Hunter's ears perked up, and he tilted his head as if understanding her dilemma. In the short time he had been with them, Jessica had been amazed by his intelligence and his gentle attentiveness to Lily. He seemed to understand commands without being taught, and his protective nature had become increasingly evident. An idea formed in Jessica's mind, risky, perhaps even irresponsible by some standards, but born of necessity and growing trust. "Hunter," she said firmly, drawing the dog's full attention. "Watch Lily." The German shepherd's posture straightened, his eyes alert and focused. Jessica repeated the command, pointing to her daughter. Hunter moved closer to Lily, settling beside her with an air of responsibility that seemed almost human. Jessica prepared quickly for work, setting out snacks and sippy cups within Lily's reach, turning on her daughter's favorite cartoon and securing the child-proof locks on all cabinets and doors. Before leaving, she knelt before Hunter once more. "I'm trusting you," she whispered, feeling both ridiculous and desperate for talking to a dog as if he could comprehend the weight of her words. "Keep her safe." Throughout her shift at the drugstore, Jessica was distracted, checking her phone constantly and calling home during every break. Each time she heard Lily's cheerful babbling and occasional giggles through the speaker. Once, she thought she heard Hunter's low bark in the background, as if he were responding to her voice on the phone. When she returned home 4 hours later, she found Lily napping on the living room floor, curled against Hunter's side, surrounded by her toys. The German shepherd's eyes opened immediately at the sound of the door, but he didn't move, seemingly unwilling to disturb the sleeping child. Relief washed over Jessica, followed quickly by tears that had been building for months. Tears of exhaustion, of constant worry, of the relentless struggle to provide for her daughter alone. She sank to the floor beside them, her hand finding Hunter's head. "Thank you," she whispered, and the dog leaned into her touch, offering comfort she hadn't realized she so desperately needed. This arrangement became their new normal, a secret partnership between a struggling single mother and a once-abandoned dog who had found renewed purpose. On days when Mrs. Reynolds was unavailable, Hunter became Lily's guardian, a responsibility he seemed to embrace with solemn dedication. What Jessica didn't see were the moments when Hunter would lead Lily back from the bathroom cabinet she had somehow managed to open despite the child-proof lock, or how he would position himself between the toddler and the radiator when she wandered too close. She didn't witness how he would nudge Lily's fallen sippy cup back within her reach, or how he would retrieve toys that had rolled under the furniture, presenting them to the delighted child as if they were precious gifts. As autumn deepened into winter, Jessica noticed something else changing. The abandoned factory where she had found Hunter and Lily together had become a gathering place for strays. On her walks to work, she would see animals entering and exiting the building, cats slipping through broken windows, a three-legged dog limping through a gap in the fence, birds nesting in the rafters visible through the collapsed roof. More. Curiously, the exterior of the factory had begun to transform. Vines that should have withered in the Pennsylvania winter instead flourished, climbing the rusted walls with vibrant green tenacity. Flowers bloomed in patches where the concrete had cracked, defying both the season and the industrial wasteland that surrounded them. One evening, as Jessica walked home from her shift at Rusty's Diner, she paused outside the factory, drawn by a strange glow emanating from within. Cautiously, she approached a broken window, peering inside at a scene that challenged her understanding of reality. The interior space, which had been bleak and forbidding weeks earlier, now pulsed with a subtle energy. Plants had indeed taken root throughout the concrete floor, creating patches of green amid the grey. Small animals moved about with purpose, rather than the frantic scavenging of strays. They seemed organized, communal. In the center of it all, beneath a hole in the roof where moonlight streamed down like a spotlight, sat the one-eyed tabby she remembered from that first day. The cat was grooming a litter of kittens, while nearby, the limping raccoon appeared to be sorting through objects, bottle caps, colorful bits of paper, shiny buttons, arranging them in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Jessica rubbed her eyes, certain that exhaustion was causing her to hallucinate. But when she looked again, the scene remained, and something deep within her recognized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, something beyond rational explanation. She backed away slowly, her mind racing. That night, as she watched Hunter curled protectively around her sleeping daughter, Jessica couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries her unlikely companion held, and what forces had truly been set in motion the day Lily's innocent touch had awakened something profound in a wounded animal's soul. The next morning, Jessica awoke to find Hunter sitting attentively by the front door, his posture suggesting urgency rather than his usual request to be let out. When she opened the door, he didn't leave immediately, but looked back at her expectantly, then took a few steps toward the path that led to the factory before pausing to see if she would follow. "Hunter, I have to get Lily ready for Mrs. Reynolds," Jessica explained, feeling slightly foolish for reasoning with a dog. "I don't have time for—" Her words were interrupted by a soft whine from Hunter, a sound so plaintive and insistent that it gave her pause. There was intelligence in his eyes that sometimes unsettled her, an awareness that seemed to transcend animal instinct. Jessica bundled Lily in her winter coat and followed Hunter toward the factory, curiosity overcoming her reservations. The morning air was crisp with early December frost, their breath forming small clouds as they walked. Hunter led the way with purpose, occasionally looking back to ensure they were still following, his tail held high with an air of importance. As they approached the abandoned building, Jessica noticed more changes that hadn't been visible in the moonlight. The vines crawling up the exterior walls had sprouted small white flowers that shouldn't have been possible in Pennsylvania's winter. The rusted metal siding, once a uniform dirty brown, now displayed patches of vibrant color where the corrosion had given way to something that resembled polished copper. Hunter led them not to the broken window where Jessica had peered in the previous night, but to a side door she hadn't noticed before. The door, unlike the rest of the structure, appeared recently cleaned, its hinges oiled and functional. When Hunter nudged it with his nose, it swung open soundlessly, revealing a transformed interior that made Jessica gasp. The vast open space of the factory floor had been divided into distinct areas, separated by arrangements of salvaged materials, wooden pallets stacked to form walls, sheets of corrugated metal creating roofed sections, old furniture repurposed into nests and beds. But it wasn't the improvised architecture that took Jessica's breath away. It was the inhabitants. Animals of all kinds moved throughout the space with purposeful harmony. The one-eyed tabby cat supervised a nursery area where several litters of kittens played under the watchful eyes of other adult cats. The limping raccoon, along with two others of its kind, sorted through piles of found objects, separating them by type and utility. Birds roosted in the rafters, occasionally swooping down to collect bits of string or fluff, building nests despite the winter season. Most surprisingly, several dogs of various breeds and sizes patrolled the perimeter, maintaining what appeared to be a security system. Among them, Jessica recognized a chocolate Labrador, missing one ear that had been featured on lost pet posters around town months ago, and a pair of elderly beagles that had been abandoned when their owner moved to a nursing home. "What is this place?" Jessica whispered, clutching Lily closer as her daughter squirmed with excitement at the sight of so many animals. Hunter barked once, drawing the attention of the other animals. Activity paused momentarily as dozens of eyes turned toward the newcomers. Then, remarkably, the animals resumed their tasks, accepting their presence as if Jessica and Lily had been expected. Hunter guided them deeper into the factory, where Jessica discovered the source of the strange energy she had sensed. In the center of the building, beneath the largest opening in the roof, a garden flourished. Plants that had no business growing indoors, much less in winter, thrived in concentric circles around a clear spring that bubbled up through a crack in the concrete floor. The water pooled in a natural basin before disappearing into another fissure, creating a continuous flow that filled the air with a gentle trickling sound. "This isn't possible," Jessica murmured, setting Lily down carefully on a patch of soft moss beside the spring. The toddler immediately reached for the water, giggling as it sparkled in the sunlight, streaming through the roof. Hunter sat beside them, his posture proud, as if showing off his creation. And perhaps, Jessica realized with a jolt of understanding, that was exactly what he was doing. Somehow, this place, this sanctuary, had formed around the German Shepherd after his encounter with Lily. The connection between her daughter and the dog had sparked something miraculous, something beyond rational explanation, as if confirming her thoughts. A small sapling at the edge of the garden visibly stretched upward, growing several inches before her eyes when Lily's laughter echoed across the space. Jessica rubbed her eyes, certain she was hallucinating, but when she looked again, the sapling remained taller, its leaves a bit broader. "Hunter," she said softly, turning to the dog with new understanding. "What happened to you two that day?" The German Shepherd merely tilted his head, amber eyes reflecting wisdom beyond animal comprehension. He couldn't answer, of course, but Jessica felt the truth settling into her consciousness. Her daughter's innocent touch had awakened something primal and powerful in Hunter, a capacity for healing and renewal that had transformed not just the dog, but the space around him. For the next several hours, Jessica explored the sanctuary with Lily and Hunter as their guides. She discovered areas where injured animals were being tended by others of their kind, using methods that seemed both primitive and eerily effective. A squirrel with a damaged paw had it wrapped in leaves held in place by spider silk. A hawk with an injured wing rested in a nest lined with medicinal herbs that Jessica recognized from her grandmother's remedies. Most surprisingly, she found evidence of human visitation, small tributes left behind by people who must have discovered this place as she had, handwritten notes of gratitude tucked into crevices, photographs of beloved pets who had perhaps found refuge here, small tokens of appreciation like hand-knitted blankets and bowls of food. As midday approached, Jessica reluctantly prepared to leave for her shift at the drugstore. She had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied logical explanation, and part of her feared that leaving meant it might disappear, that she might return to find just another abandoned building populated by ordinary strays. "We have to go now," she told Hunter, gathering Lily, who had spent the morning delightedly playing with a litter of kittens under the watchful eye of the one-eyed Tabby. "But we'll come back, I promise." Hunter escorted them to the entrance where Jessica was surprised to find Mrs. Reynolds approaching, her grey hair visible beneath a knitted cap. "Mrs. Reynolds, what are you doing here? I thought you were sick," Jessica called out, confusion evident in her voice. The elderly woman smiled warmly. "I'm feeling much better today, dear, and I had a feeling I might find you here." She glanced at Hunter with a knowing look that suggested this wasn't her first visit to the sanctuary. This place has a way of calling to those who need it. "You know about this?" Jessica gestured toward the factory. Mrs. Reynolds nodded. "For a few months now, I found my Percival here." At Jessica's blank look, she clarified, "My cat who disappeared 3 years ago. He was living here, helping with the young ones. I visit him every few days." She smiled at Lily. "I can watch her here while you work if you'd like. It's safer than you might think." Jessica hesitated, the rational part of her brain insisting that leaving her daughter in an abandoned factory surrounded by wild animals was the height of irresponsibility. But another part, the part that had witnessed the harmony and purpose within those walls, recognized that Lily might actually be safer here than anywhere else in Rustville. "Hunter stays with her," Jessica stipulated, and both Mrs. Reynolds and the German Shepherd seemed to nod in agreement. During her shift at the drugstore, Jessica found it difficult to focus. Her mind kept returning to the sanctuary, to the impossibility of what she had witnessed. She had always considered herself practical, not given to flights of fancy or belief in the supernatural. Yet she couldn't deny the evidence of her own eyes. Plants growing in winter, animals organizing with near-human intelligence, a spring emerging from solid concrete. On her lunch break, she found herself researching similar phenomena on her phone, searching for rational explanations. She found accounts of miracle gardens sprouting in unlikely places, stories of animals displaying unusual behaviors in certain locations, theories about geomagnetic anomalies creating conditions for accelerated plant growth. None fully explained what she had seen, but all suggested she wasn't the first to encounter such mysteries. When her shift ended, Jessica hurried back to the factory, half expecting to find it return to its previous state of abandonment. Instead, she discovered even more activity than in the morning. New animals had arrived, a blind fox being led by a pair of rabbits, a limping deer guided by the chocolate Labrador, a flock of pigeons carrying twigs and leaves in a coordinated effort to build something in the rafters. Mrs. Reynolds sat on a salvaged armchair near the central garden, knitting contentedly, while Lily napped on a bed of soft moss, Hunter curled protectively around her. The elderly woman looked up as Jessica approached, her eyes twinkling with shared wonder. "She's had a wonderful day," Mrs. Reynolds reported. "Those kittens wore her out, and Hunter hasn't left her side for a moment." Jessica sank onto a wooden grate beside them, watching her sleeping daughter. "Mrs. Reynolds, what is this place, really?" The older woman set her knitting aside, considering the question with the thoughtfulness it deserved. "I believe it's what all sacred spaces are, a manifestation of love." She gestured toward Hunter and Lily. Something extraordinary happened. Between them, something pure enough to create ripples in the fabric of our ordinary world. "But how is this possible?" Jessica pressed. Mrs. Reynolds smiled gently. "The world is full of mysteries we can't explain, dear. Some call it magic, others call it miracles. Scientists might talk about quantum entanglement or morphic resonance. The name doesn't matter so much as the gift itself." She reached out to touch a flowering vine that hadn't been there that morning, watching as it curled responsively around her finger. "I think when that child touched that wounded dog, their innocence and need created something powerful enough to heal not just them, but this forgotten place." As if on cue, Lily stirred, her small hands reaching automatically for Hunter's fur. The German shepherd licked her cheek gently, causing the toddler to giggle in her half-awake state. Around them, flowers visibly turned toward the sound, as if Lily's laughter was sunshine they sought. "It's growing," Mrs. Reynolds observed. "Each day the sanctuary expands its influence. Have you noticed the neighborhood changing?" Jessica hadn't, too consumed with work and survival to pay much attention to her surroundings. But now that Mrs. Reynolds mentioned it, she recalled small differences she had dismissed. Less garbage on the streets, neighbors speaking to each other more frequently, wildflowers pushing through cracks in the sidewalks where only weeds had grown before. "Hunter goes out at night," Mrs. Reynolds continued. "He leads the others on what I can only describe as missions of restoration. They bring back animals in need, yes, but they also seem to be healing the land itself, starting from this epicenter and radiating outward." Jessica watched as Hunter gently nudged Lily, fully awake, the toddler's delighted squeal causing a nearby sapling to visibly strengthen, its trunk thickening before their eyes. As winter deepened, word of the sanctuary spread through Rustville in whispers and rumors. Some dismissed it as urban legend, the kind of fairy tale that springs up in struggling towns where hope is as scarce as employment. Others, particularly those whose lost pets had mysteriously returned healthier than when they disappeared, believed. A few brave souls ventured to the factory to see for themselves, and like Jessica, left changed by what they witnessed. The sanctuary itself continued to evolve. The garden at its heart expanded, breaking through the concrete floor. In ever-widening circles of green, the spring fed a small stream that wound through the building, creating microhabitats for different species. The animals developed increasingly sophisticated systems of cooperation, food storage for winter, medical areas for the wounded, nurseries for the young. Hunter remained at the center of it all, his intelligence and leadership guiding the sanctuary's growth. Each night, he led expeditions into the surrounding neighborhoods, returning with animals in need of shelter and healing. Jessica often awoke to find new strays in their small trailer, temporary guests that Hunter would eventually lead to the factory once they were strong enough. For Jessica and Lily, the sanctuary became a second home. Mrs. Reynolds, whose health had remarkably improved since she began spending time there, watched Lily among the animals while Jessica worked. The toddler thrived in this unusual environment, her vocabulary expanding to include the names of dozens of animals, her natural empathy developing as she helped tend to injured creatures under Hunter's watchful guidance. But as February arrived, with its bitter winds and heavy snows, trouble appeared on the horizon. Jessica was restocking shelves at the drugstore when she overheard a conversation between Mr. Harrington, the town's most prominent real estate developer, and Mayor Wilson. "The old Westbrook manufacturing plant," Harrington was saying, his voice low but excited. "Perfect location for the new shipping center. Close to the highway, plenty of space, and the land is dirt cheap since it's been abandoned for years." Jessica froze, a bottle of cough syrup clutched in her hand. The Westbrook plant was the sanctuary. "What about the environmental assessment?" Mayor Wilson asked. "That place has been sitting there collecting who knows what toxins for 20 years. Harrington waved a dismissive hand. "Already taken care of. My guys went in last week. Place is surprisingly clean. Better than expected. Actually, almost like someone's been maintaining it," he chuckled. "Probably those environmental hippies sneaking in to plant trees or whatever they do." "And the demolition timeline?" the mayor pressed. 30 days, Harrington replied confidently. "We've already filed the permits. Once they're approved next week, we'll start prep work immediately. By summer, we'll have foundation poured for the new complex." Jessica's heart raced as she continued pretending to work while straining to hear more details. Demolition, 30 days. The sanctuary, with all its mysterious beauty and healing energy, would be destroyed, replaced by a shipping center that would provide minimum wage jobs while obliterating something miraculous. That evening, Jessica rushed to the sanctuary as soon as her shift ended, finding Mrs. Reynolds reading a storybook to Lily amid a circle of attentive animals. The scene would have been comical if the situation weren't so dire. "They're going to tear it down," Jessica blurted, her breath coming in panicked clouds in the cold air. "Harrington Development is turning this place into a shipping center. They start in 30 days. Mrs. Reynolds closed the book slowly, her weathered face settling into lines of concern. "I feared this might happen. Rustville has always valued progress over preservation." "But this isn't just some old building," Jessica protested, gesturing to the thriving ecosystem around them. I don't even have words for what this is." "A miracle," Mrs. Reynolds supplied simply, "but one that most people aren't ready to acknowledge." Over the next few days, Jessica and Mrs. Reynolds reached out to everyone they knew who had experienced the sanctuary's magic. They formed a small coalition of believers: Ellen from the library, whose asthma had improved after finding her lost; Parakeet, living in the factory rafters; Marcus, the high school science teacher who had been documenting the impossible flora growing within and around the building; the Peterson family, whose autistic son had spoken his first words while interacting with the animals there. They gathered in Jessica's small trailer, the space crowded with concerned faces as they strategized ways to save the sanctuary. Traditional approaches seemed inadequate. Environmental protests and petitions would take too long, and proving the scientific significance of the sanctuary would require revealing its existence to scrutiny that might do more harm than good. What about simply buying the property? suggested Marcus, pushing his glasses up his nose. If we pooled our resources... Harrington paid $1.2 million for that land, Ellen interrupted. I checked the county records. Even if we all sold everything we own, we wouldn't come close. Jessica felt Hunter lean against her leg, his steady presence a comfort amid the mounting desperation. She reached down to stroke his head, and as her fingers touched his fur, she felt a subtle current of energy, the same mysterious force that permeated the sanctuary. What if we showed them, she said suddenly, looking up at the gathered faces. What if we brought Mayor Wilson and the town council to the sanctuary? Let them see for themselves what would be lost. Marcus shook his head doubtfully. You think hardened politicians and businessmen will be swayed by some plants and animals? They'll just see dollar signs and tax revenue. You don't understand, Jessica insisted. No one who truly experiences the sanctuary leaves unchanged. There's something there that speaks to something deep inside you, something that reminds you of what matters. After much debate, they decided to try Jessica's approach. Mrs. Reynolds, who had once been the mayor's elementary school teacher and still commanded his respect, would arrange the visit under the pretense of showing him an environmental education project some residents had started. The day of the visit arrived with a heavy snowfall that blanketed Rustville in white silence. Jessica paced nervously inside the sanctuary, which seemed to sense the importance of the moment. The animals were on their best behavior, the central garden more vibrant than ever despite the winter season outside. Hunter stayed close to Lily, both of them positioned near the spring at Jessica's instruction. She had noticed that the sanctuary's most dramatic manifestations often occurred in their presence, particularly when Lily's innocent joy interacted with Hunter's protective nature. At precisely 10 o'clock, the side door opened and Mrs. Reynolds entered, followed by Mayor Wilson, 2 town council members, and to Jessica's dismay, Mr. Harrington himself. The developer's cold eyes scanned the interior with calculation rather than wonder. What is this place, Eleanor? Mayor Wilson asked Mrs. Reynolds, his breath visible in the cold air as he took in the improbable garden, the organized activities of the animals, the structural improvements that made the once derelict factory now seem almost designed in its repurposing. This, Charles, is what your shipping center would destroy, Mrs. Reynolds replied calmly. A sanctuary that has been healing our town in ways you haven't noticed. Mr. Harrington snorted dismissively, stepping forward to examine a flowering vine that curled around a support beam. Looks like a bunch of squatters and strays to me. Nothing a good exterminator and cleanup crew can't handle. Jessica felt anger rising in her chest at his callousness, but before she could speak, Lily let out a delighted laugh as a butterfly, impossible for the season, landed on her outstretched finger. The sound echoed through the vast space, and as it did, the sanctuary responded. Flowers visibly turned toward the child, petals opening wider. The spring bubbled more vigorously, its clear water catching the light streaming through the roof and creating rainbows that danced across the walls. Most dramatically, a sapling near where the mayor stood suddenly grew several inches, its branches extending toward the group of visitors as if reaching out in greeting. Mayor Wilson stumbled, backward, his eyes wide. What the? It's a trick, Harrington declared, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. Hydraulics under the floor or something. Special effects. No tricks, Mr. Harrington. Marcus, the science teacher, stepped forward from where he had been observing nearby. I've been documenting these phenomena for months. Growth rates accelerated by factors of hundreds. Plant species adapting to conditions that should be impossible for them. Animal behaviors that defy evolutionary understanding. He held up a tablet displaying charts and graphs. This isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented. The mayor approached Lily and Hunter cautiously, watching as the toddler giggled and petted the German shepherd. "What's happening here?" he asked Jessica quietly. "We don't fully understand it," she admitted. "But it started with them, with a moment of connection between an abandoned, wounded dog and an innocent child. Something awakened, and it's been growing ever since, healing not just the animals and plants, but the people who come here too." Mayor Wilson knelt to eye level with Lily, his political instincts momentarily set aside in genuine wonder. "Hello there, little one." Lily smiled at him, then pointed to Hunter. "He makes things better," she said simply, one of her longer sentences. As if to demonstrate, she placed her small hand on Hunter's head, and the German shepherd leaned into her touch. The air around them seemed to shimmer slightly, and a patch of moss beneath the mayor's feet visibly thickened, becoming softer and more vibrant. The mayor stood slowly, his expression troubled yet awestruck. "I've lived in Rustville all my life," he said, addressing no one in particular. "Watched it decline when the factories closed, watched families struggle and leave, watched hope drain away year by year." He turned in a slow circle, taking in the transformed space. And here, in the most unlikely place, something beautiful has taken root. "It's worth more than a shipping center," Mrs. Reynolds said softly. Harrington, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly stepped forward. "It doesn't matter what's happening here. I own this property. The permits are being processed. The demolition is scheduled." His voice had hardened, but Jessica noticed he was carefully avoiding looking directly at Lily and Hunter. "Progress doesn't stop for sentimentality." "Actually, Charles," Mayor Wilson said slowly, turning to face the developer, "the permits haven't been approved yet, and as mayor I have some discretion in these matters." Harrington's face reddened. "We have a contract, Wilson. Your town needs the jobs and tax revenue this development will bring. You can't just—" "I think," the mayor interrupted, watching as a cardinal landed on his outstretched hand, something the bird would never normally do, "that Rustville might need this more than another warehouse with minimum wage jobs." He gently stroked the bird's bright feathers before it flew back to the rafters. "We need to take some time to study what's happening here, to understand it." Spring arrived in Rustville with unprecedented vigor. Cherry blossoms appeared on trees that had been barren for years. Lawns turned emerald green weeks earlier than usual, and gardens throughout town produced vegetables of remarkable size and abundance. The influence of the sanctuary had spread beyond the old factory walls, breathing new life into a community that had long been withering. The battle to save the sanctuary had not been easily won. After the mayor's visit, Mr. Harrington had launched a legal challenge, claiming breach of contract and demanding compensation. But when his own lawyer visited the sanctuary, ostensibly to document the trespassing and environmental violations Harrington alleged, the attorney emerged 6 hours later with a resignation letter and a newfound interest in environmental law. The turning point came when national media caught wind of the story. What began as a human interest piece about a small town fighting a developer quickly evolved into something more profound when reporters experienced the sanctuary firsthand. Scientists arrived to study the phenomena, their initial skepticism dissolving as they witnessed accelerated plant growth, unprecedented animal cooperation, and the mysterious healing properties that seemed to emanate from the central spring. By April, Westbrook Manufacturing Plant had been designated a site of special scientific interest, protecting it from development. Mr. Harrington, recognizing the shifting winds, eventually negotiated a settlement that allowed him to save face while relinquishing his claim on the property. The sanctuary was safe. For Jessica and Lily, life had transformed in ways they could never have imagined. The publicity surrounding the sanctuary had brought an unexpected opportunity. a grant from a national conservation organization to serve as the sanctuary's official caretaker. The position came with a modest salary and, more importantly, a renovated caretaker's cottage on the edge of the property. On a warm May morning, Jessica stood on the porch of their new home, watching Lily and Hunter playing in the meadow that had once been the factory's parking lot. Wildflowers bloomed in vibrant patches, bees hummed contentedly among the blossoms, and birds sang from the branches of young trees that seemed to grow a little taller each day. "They look happy, Mrs. Reynolds observed, joining Jessica with 2 steaming mugs of tea. The elderly woman had become a fixture at the sanctuary, coordinating the growing number of volunteers who helped maintain the space and documenting the stories of those who found healing there. "They are," Jessica agreed, accepting the tea gratefully. "We all are." It was true. The constant struggle for survival that had defined Jessica's life for so long had eased. There was still work. The sanctuary required daily attention, and managing the increasing number of visitors took considerable effort, but it was meaningful work that nourished her spirit rather than depleting it. Lily had blossomed as well. Now approaching her 2nd birthday, she was speaking in complete sentences, her vocabulary far exceeding typical developmental milestones. The doctors who had examined her as part of the scientific studies attributed her accelerated development to the enriched environment and constant interaction with the sanctuary's animals. Jessica suspected there was more to it, a deeper connection to the mysterious energy that Hunter had awakened. "The tour group will be here at noon," Mrs. Reynolds reminded her, consulting the small notebook she always carried. "And Marcus wants to show you the new data from the growth studies. He's quite excited about something he found in the soil samples." Jessica nodded, taking a sip of her tea. The sanctuary had become a destination for eco-tourists, spiritual seekers, and scientists alike. They carefully managed the number of visitors to prevent disruption to the animals and plants, but sharing the miracle had become part of their mission. Each person who experienced the sanctuary carried its influence back to their own community, creating ripples of positive change that extended far beyond Rustville. Hunter trotted up the porch steps, his coat now glossy and full, the scars from his old wounds barely visible beneath his thick fur. He nudged Jessica's hand with his nose, his amber eyes communicating more clearly than words that someone was approaching, someone important. Jessica looked up to see a sleek black car pulling into the driveway. It was unusual for unscheduled visitors to arrive, especially in such an expensive vehicle. Hunter didn't seem alarmed, however, which she had learned to trust as a good sign. The car door opened, and a woman emerged, tall, elegantly dressed, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She surveyed the property with sharp eyes before walking purposefully toward the cottage. "Can I help you?" Jessica called, setting down her mug and moving to the edge of the porch. The woman stopped at the bottom of the steps, her posture rigid, yet somehow uncertain. "My name is Eleanor Mitchell," she said, her voice cultured but strained. "I'm looking for a dog. A German shepherd that might have found his way here." Jessica felt Hunter press against her leg, his body tense but not aggressive. "You're looking for Hunter?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Eleanor's composure faltered slightly. "We called him Rex," she said softly. "He was our family dog for 5 years before—" She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. "Before you abandoned him," Jessica finished, a protective edge entering her voice. The woman flinched as if struck. "It wasn't," she began, then stopped herself. "Yes," she admitted finally, "we abandoned him. My husband lost his job, we lost our house, and in the chaos of moving into my sister's condo, we made a choice I have regretted every day since." Hunter, moved forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. There was no growling, no raised hackles, just intense scrutiny, as if he were reading her soul. "How did you find us?" Jessica asked. "The news stories," Eleanor explained. "They showed footage of this place, of the animals. I recognized him immediately." She swallowed hard. "Our circumstances have improved. My husband found work again. We have a home now with a yard. The children still ask about him." Jessica felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at this woman who had discarded Hunter like an unwanted possession, sympathy for the regret that was evident in her eyes, and fear at the possibility of losing the remarkable being who had transformed their lives. Before she could respond, Lily came running up, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mommy, the flowers are dancing," she announced, then stopped short when she noticed the visitor. She moved closer to Hunter, placing a small hand on his back in a gesture that seemed both protective and seeking protection. Eleanor's eyes widened at the sight of the child's easy familiarity with the dog who had once belonged to her family. "He always was good with children," she said softly. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the distant calls of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Jessica felt caught in an impossible position. Did Hunter still belong with his original family? Did she have the right to keep him from them, from the children who missed him? As if sensing her distress, Hunter made the decision himself. He moved forward, approaching Eleanor slowly. The woman knelt, tears filling her eyes as she reached out a trembling hand. "Rex," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." Hunter sniffed her hand, then allowed her to touch his head briefly. There was recognition in the gesture, an acknowledgement of their shared past. But then, deliberately, he turned and walked back to Jessica and Lily, sitting between them with a finality that couldn't be misinterpreted. Eleanor stood, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I understand," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He's found a new home, a better one. Would you like to see what he's helped create?" Jessica offered, her anger softening at the woman's evident pain. "The sanctuary is, well, it's something you have to experience to understand." The tour that followed became a journey of healing for Eleanor Mitchell, as Jessica guided her through the sanctuary, explaining how it had begun with a wounded dog and an innocent child. She watched the woman's expression transform from sorrow to wonder. They observed animals working in coordinated harmony, plants growing with impossible vigor, and the central spring with its mysterious healing properties. Near the end of their visit, standing beside the pool where the spring collected before flowing out to nourish the expanding garden, Eleanor knelt and cupped her hands in the clear water. "May I?" she asked, looking up at Jessica. At Jessica's nod, she drank, closing her eyes as the cool liquid touched her lips. When she stood again, something had shifted in her demeanor. A tension released, a burden lightened. "Thank you," she said simply, "for showing me this, for taking care of him when we failed." Two, she looked at Hunter, who had remained close to Lily throughout the tour. He was meant for something greater than being just our pet, wasn't he? "I think he was meant to be exactly where he is," Jessica replied. "Sometimes our greatest mistakes lead to unexpected blessings." Eleanor nodded, reaching into her purse to withdraw a business card. "If you ever need anything at all, please contact me. My husband's new company could provide resources, funding for the sanctuary's expansion." Jessica accepted the card, recognizing the olive branch it represented. "Thank you, and your children are welcome to visit Hunter anytime. He's part of our family now, but that doesn't mean he has to forget his first one." As Eleanor departed, Jessica felt a sense of completion, as if a circle had been closed. Hunter's journey from beloved pet to abandoned victim to healing catalyst had reached a point of resolution. The wounds of betrayal had been acknowledged and, if not fully healed, at least addressed with honesty and compassion. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Jessica sat on a bench near the central garden, watching Lily and Hunter playing with a group of recently rescued puppies. Mrs. Reynolds had gone home for the day. The scientists had packed away their equipment, and the tourists had departed, leaving the sanctuary in peaceful quietude. Marcus, the science teacher who had become the sanctuary's most dedicated researcher, joined her on the bench, a tablet computer in his hands. "I've been analyzing the data from the soil and water samples," he said without preamble, his excitement evident in his rushed words. "There's something here we've never seen before, a unique microbiological profile that seems to accelerate plant growth and enhance healing in animal tissue." Jessica smiled at his enthusiasm. "And what do your scientific instruments say about why it's happening? About why a wounded dog and a toddler created all of this?" She gestured to the thriving ecosystem around them. Marcus adjusted his glasses, his expression turning thoughtful. "Science can tell us how, but not always why," he admitted. "There are forces at work here that transcend our current understanding. Maybe it's a previously undocumented symbiotic relationship. Maybe it's something in the geological composition of this specific location that catalyzed with certain biological elements." He paused, watching as Lily's laughter caused a nearby flower to visibly turn toward her. Or maybe it's something more profound, something about the power of innocence to heal, about the resilience of life in the face of abandonment, about the transformative nature of unconditional love. Jessica nodded, content with the mystery. Some phenomena were meant to be experienced rather than explained, their meaning found in their impact rather than their mechanism. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the clear spring sky, Jessica gathered Lily in her arms, ready to return to their cottage for the night. Hunter walked beside them, his presence steady and reassuring. The path was lined with luminescent flowers that had appeared spontaneously months earlier, their soft blue glow providing gentle illumination. "Mommy," Lily said sleepily, her head resting on Jessica's shoulder. "Hunter made the sad place happy." "Yes, sweetheart," Jessica agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "He certainly did." The sanctuary continued to thrive and expand its influence, becoming a beacon of hope not just for Rustville, but for visitors from across the country who sought healing, inspiration, or simply a reminder that beauty could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Scientists studied its phenomena, spiritual seekers found affirmation in its mysteries, and ordinary people discovered renewed connection to the natural world within its boundaries. And at its heart remained the extraordinary bond between a once wounded German shepherd and a child whose innocent touch had awakened something miraculous, a testament to the power of connection to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities, a living reminder that even in the most abandoned places, new life waits to be discovered. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Hunter and Lily has touched your hearts. The transformation of Rustville reminds us that healing and renewal can emerge from the most unexpected places. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist of equally moving narratives. You'll find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this journey of redemption and wonder, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexity and celebrate the power of connection. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have many more tales that will inspire and move you. We look forward to reading your thoughts and reactions in the comments section below.